Interstellar was the first Christopher Nolan film that I saw in cinemas, and it was a controversial movie at the time of release. There wasn't much consensus on its quality, and although it was generally well received, there were still quite a few people who thought it was one of the most overrated movies of the year. This specific reception of the film and the fact that I really liked it on release is the reason I assumed my opinion wouldn't be as positive when watching it for the first time since release. I think Interstellar is one of Nolan's best films, probably ties for second with The Dark Knight behind Memento in all honesty. This film is an excellent exploration of human nature in extreme circumstances, and although some moments feel slightly cheesy, it's overall very impactful and emotional, and it's a movie that made me cry the first time I saw it, and the second time when I saw it this afternoon. Although on release some audiences found Interstellar's way of dealing with the theme of love and how it connects us was ham-fisted, I personally found that it was very real and grounded. The film deals with themes of selfishness, selflessness, isolation, and how these things impact a person's sense of self-preservation. There are numerous examples of characters throughout the film dealing with either one of those three things in a different way, and especially with a character introduced towards the latter half of the film that has been alone in space for decades. Matthew McConaughey's family relationship is the focus of the film, and his character Cooper's desire to provide his kids with a life and a home in the future is a driving conflict of the movie. Not only does it drive the events of the plot, but ultimately it creates this interesting series of decisions that Cooper must make regarding the future of humanity and his children. There's a real sense of urgency and tragedy to the whole plot because of the way Interstellar sets up the situation on Earth and Cooper's relationship with his family. The first act of this movie is an exposition dump, but for the most part I really liked the way it was handled. There was a lot of subtlety in the way certain details were presented about Earth, like its population. Obviously the characters are aware of how many people are left, so instead of specifying how many people remain, they simply imply that it's less than 6 billion and leave the rest to the audience. Stuff like this is interesting, and it contributed heavily to the more realistic feeling of the film, something that is backed up in its style, which I'll talk about later. Cooper's relationship with his daughter specifically was something that I was really invested in after the first act of Interstellar, and overall I think it's the best part of the early film. Murphy, Cooper's daughter, was portrayed well by the actor despite her young age. Her facial expressions were almost always spot on for someone with the limited emotional reach of someone that age, as was the dialogue. Delivery of this dialogue wasn't always as spot on as it could have been in some of the more emotional scenes of the first act, and that was distracting overall, but it's still a commendable performance. As was Matthew McConaughey, who played Cooper and his paternal connection to Murphy with a lot of emotion and passion. Every part of this movie that got me in the feels was something to do with Murphy and Cooper's relationship, and this is all due to the setup in the first act. I felt from the opening that Cooper was someone Murphy looked up to, and this kept me invested in the relationship as it evolved. Christopher Nolan's work on this movie is, I think, underrated. While many criticisms focus on the flaws of the story, people forget to mention that Nolan does some great things with a lot of the film's presentation. The way he told Hans Zimmer to create music based on a brief outline of the film rather than scene by scene is one of the better decisions for movie music that I've heard. The malleability of the song structure in Interstellar is really something amazing. The way the same basic note progression can fit so many of the film's individual moments is really impressive. The music can so easily blend from a sense of curiosity and wonder to melancholy. And in addition to this, the fact that the music retains a lot of the same basic structure means that it helps to link a lot of the film's different sequences, while also having enough variety to keep the music interesting throughout. The sound design is also interesting, especially in sequences with dust storms and in the silence of space. Both contrasting soundscapes are well executed and add a great atmosphere to sequences that they're used in. It's very real, and this is something that carries over to the visuals, which at most parts of the film almost feel like a documentary, something also seen in the way Interstellar cuts to interviews of people talking about the dust and how it affected their lives. Although I wasn't a fan of the interviews specifically, the rest of the visuals are gorgeous. However, the realness is something that for me enhances the aspect ratio shift in an irritating way. It's not distracting in any significant sense, it just kept reminding me how much better the visuals would be overall if Interstellar was entirely shot in 16:9. The narrower, more cinematic ratio doesn't really fit with the realism of the rest of the film and kind of implies a more dramatic tone that is actually present. Not to say that it isn't tense in parts, just that this isn't the most prevalent feeling of the film. This film is honestly pretty underrated based on all of the opinions that I've seen on the internet, and I think everyone should definitely give it a go.
Interstellar. Yeah, that's a